Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we will discuss about FIR and some of the important concepts related to FIR and some of the landmark cases attached to it. So firstly, we should know about the meaning of FIR. CRPC does not provide any interpretation clause respective to the term, and as per to the section 154, as it provides the provision related to FIR is the first information about a cognizable offense. If we are talking about the principal object behind FIR provision, so we can say there are two point of view, and the first view is from the side of the informant, and that is to set the criminal law into motion. And if we are considering the view of investigating authorities, the principal object is to obtain information about the alleged criminal activity so as to be able to take suitable steps in order to trace and bring to the book the guilty. So section 154 clearly says that FIR is dealing with the cognizable offenses, and that is related to the first information. So we can say any person can give information to the police relating to the commission of cognizable offense. It has to be reduced into writing by the police officer, and it shall be read over to the informant and shall be signed by the informant. And also the police officer is required to enter the substance of information in a book kept by him, and that book is also called to be as a station diary, or you can say the FIR diary. So we can say that whenever any information has been given to officer in charge of police station orally, it has to be reduced into writing, and that should be read over to the informant and signed by the informant and should be kept into a prescribed book. And also, section 154 says that the informant shall be given a copy of the information as recorded under the subsection 1 of section 154, and that should be given free of cost to him. In case the informant is a woman and that woman provides an information regarding the attempt or commission of any offense which falls under section 326 AB, section 354 ABCD, section 376 AB, B, C, D, DA, DB, and E, and section 509 of Indian Penal Code. So in that circumstances, that information should be recorded by the women officers only. The proviso of section 154 clearly says that if in case there is a victim who is temporarily or permanently mentally or physically disabled, and against whom an offense under section 354, 354A, B, C, D, 376A to E, or under section 509 of Indian Penal Code is alleged to have been committed or attempted, in that circumstances the information given by such victim shall be recorded by a police officer at the residence place of such person's choice, and that should be in the presence of an interpreter or a person who is special educator, and the recording of such information shall be videographed. And also the police officer is duty bound in order to get the statement recorded by judicial magistrate under clause A of subsection 5A of section 164 as soon as possible. Up next, we have section 162 of CRPC dealing with the same, and it says that any statement made by any person during any inquiry or trial that shall not be signed by the person making it if it is reduced to writing, and that statement which has been made by that particular person during the trial or inquiry, that cannot be used in inquiry or trial of the same offense, but that can be used in inquiry or trial of any other offense, but that will not going to be used in the same offense. Therefore we can say that this particular section ensures that no statement made to the police officer which is reduced to writing be signed by the person who makes it, and no such statement or any record of such a statement, whether in you can say in a police diary or otherwise, shall be used for any purpose other than those stated in that particular section. The statement has been given by a witness during any inquiry or trial, so that statement can be used by the accused, as accused can examine the person for the purpose of contradicting him under section 145 of Indian Evidence Act, and also the prosecution can cross examine the person under section 145 of Indian Evidence Act, and that has to be done with the permission of court only. And also the person may be re-examined on the basis of the statement made under section 161 of the CRPC. And also subsection 2 of section 162 is a saving clause, and this subsection saves a dying declaration and a discovery statement, as it shall not be affected by the provisions of the subsection 1. That means subsection 1 of section 162 would not affect to any statement which has been considered to be as a dying declaration or a discovery statement. And the explanation of this section talks about contradiction by omission. See, every omission does not amount to contradiction, and the question related to the omission, whether it amounts to contradiction or not, it shall be a question of fact always. And in case any omission appears to be material or significant or relevant, in that circumstances, that omission to state a fact or circumstances in the statement may amount to contradiction. Next, we have different types of FIR. So, whenever an offense is committed in the jurisdiction of one police station, but the victim approaches the other police station for the registration of FIR, then the FIR is lodged by the subsequent police station. Such an FIR is not numbered, as it will be numbered by the police station which will having the jurisdiction in order to investigate the said offense. So that's why that kind of FIR is known to be as zero FIR. Next category we have of anti-time, or you can say event FIR. So whenever an FIR lodged and that has been lodged before the occurrence of an offense, that means before the time of occurrence of an offense, that's why that kind of FIR is known to be as anti-timed FIR, and such an FIR is a false FIR, or we can say that is a kind of a event managed FIR. Next category we have of cross FIR. See, in cases of cross FIR, two FIRs are generally registered by both the parties independently, and in such a case the court does not quash any FIR, rather it clubs together both the FIRs, and upon which the same investigating officer investigates the case. And the last category of FIR is multiple FIR. See, when for the same offense or for the same case, more than one FIR are lodged in the same police station, or you can say in a different police station, then it will be a case of a multiple FIR. Now, there are some important questions, or you can say facts related to FIR which we should know. The first question is, why FIR is known to be as an FIR? Because it is a first detailed description which has been reduced into writing, and the report contains the formal detailed information which has been signed by the informant. That's why it is known to be as an FIR. Another question we are having, that is, can an FIR be lodged by a child or a lunatic person? So if we are talking about the child can lodge the FIR if a child is in the position of understanding the surroundings and the meaning and the nature of what he is stating, then he can lodge an FIR, otherwise not. Regarding lunatic person, if the person is in his lucid interval, then FIR can be lodged by him, otherwise no lunatic person can lodge an FIR. Up next we have question, that is investigation depended upon an FIR. For this question we have section 157 of the code, and in section 157 the words used are information received or otherwise. So here in this section, information received means the FIR, and the word otherwise relate to some other sources from which the information may have been received. So it clearly says that to investigate the case, there is no dependency upon lodging an FIR. That means an investigation can be done even without lodging an FIR. Another question we are having is whether the testimony would get affected if there is any delay in lodging an FIR. So, the answer to this question is yes. The court in such cases may draw adverse inference against the role of the informant, and the court may not trust the testimony given by the informant in the court. However, the merits of the case in such cases will not get affected. And for more detailed provision related to this question, you can refer my previous video in which I have explained the consequences whenever there is any delay in lodging an FIR. And the next question is FIR a part of investigation? See, FIR can be done in two ways. Firstly, investigation started and thereafter FIR is lodged, or FIR lodged and thereafter investigation will start. So that means investigation starts only after FIR is lodged. Thus, FIR is not a part of investigation. However, in some cases, the investigation may start first, and then in the course of investigation, FIR may be lodged, but we cannot say that FIR is a part of an investigation. Now, the question is, can a cryptic or a vague information amount to an FIR or not? So, for that matter, we have two cases. First, Surajit Sarkar versus State of West Bengal. In this case, it was held that FIR is a report at the first information regarding an offense received by a police officer. However, every first information cannot be considered to be as an FIR. There may be an information made to police officer on a telephone or otherwise regarding the commission of any cognizable offenses, but the informant does not give the detailed information regarding the offense, and also he is not willing to reveal his identity, not willing to sign the FIR. His intention is just to provide the information to the police officer. In that circumstances, we can't say that the information provided via telephone is considered to be as an FIR. The other case is State of Andhra Pradesh versus Panduranga Rao. In this case, it was held that any subsequent detailed information upon which all the basic formalities have been compiled with, that only can be considered to be as an FIR, otherwise not. Next question is it compulsory to lodge an FIR? For answering this question, we have multiple cases dealing with the same. Firstly, we have State of Haryana versus Bhajan Lal, a case of 1992. In this case, it was held that the police officer is duty bound to lodge the FIR and also to send the occurrence report to the magistrate. See, section 154 nowhere mention the word reasonable or credible before the word information. So, if we are comparing section 41 clause 1 subclause A, the provision of arrest which deals with the cognizable cases, so in that particular provision it is clearly mentioned that for the purpose of arrest the information should be reasonable or credible, but under section 154 nowhere the word reasonable or credible has been used. So it has been presumed by the judges that in case if the legislature had the intention to add the provision of credibility or reasonability under the concept of FIR, so it would be expressly written under section 154 too. Thus, the police officer per se is duty bound in order to lodge the FIR, and the truthfulness of the information has to be examined later. And along with that case, the FIR is not lodged by the police officer. in that circumstances, there are some remedies provided by the Act. Number one, the complaint can be made to the superior officer under Section 154, Clause 3, which has to be read with Section 36, or a complaint or an application to the magistrate under Section 156, Clause 3, and under Section 155, Clause 2 can be made, or the person can complain to magistrate under Section 200, or any application or complaint can be made before the High Court via using the provision of Section 482. Another case we are having, that is of Ramesh Kumari versus Government of NCLT of Delhi. In this case, it was held that if the information does not reveal a cognizable offense, in that circumstances, the police officer can conduct a preliminary investigation in order to find out whether this is a cognizable case or not. If it is a cognizable offense, then in that circumstances, lodging of an FIR is compulsory. Up next, we have the case of Lalita Kumari versus Government of UP and others, 2013, which was previously known to be as Lalita Kumari versus State of UP. It was held that the lodging of FIR brings the criminal process into motion and makes an early documentation of the incident, and that would prevent any foul play on the part of the police officer. And also it was held that lodging of FIR is the first step in order to provide the justice to the victim, and it also promotes to the rule of law. And if the FIR is not lodged in that circumstance, it would create a situation of lawlessness. And the genuineness of the information is post FIR situation, and the police officer after lodging an FIR can refuse to investigate on the ground that the FIR, in case the FIR is false. And if a cognizable offense is not revealed by the information, then a preliminary investigation can be conducted in order to examine whether this particular information is related to cognizable offense or not. There was an argument that compulsory lodging of FIR would result into more of arrest. That argument is illogical, as in every case it is not compulsory to make an arrest, because the lodging of FIR is one thing and making of arrest is another one. And also it was held that in some cases, even if it is a cognizable offense, the police officer can conduct a preliminary investigation before recording an FIR, just like in the cases of matrimonial disputes, commercial offenses, or you can say corruption cases, or if the case is related to medical negligence. And also, the maximum period in order to conduct the preliminary investigation has been provided, that is of 7 days. However, the subsequent order of the court may exceed that 7 days to 15 days, but not more than that. One more point I would like to mention, in case a person lodged a false FIR, in that circumstances, the other person may file a complaint for lodging false FIR under Section 182 of CRPC. So guys, this is all about today. In case you are having any query, you can comment below, and also I will be sharing the link of my previous video for your reference. Thank you guys, thanks for watching, and have a nice day.